Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janapalava Girivardhari Gopi Janapalava Girivardhari Gopi Janapalava Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Gopi Janapalava Girivardhari Gopi Janapalava Girivardhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jaya Radha Madhava Radha Madhava Shri Radhe Shri Radhe Jaya Radha Giridhari Radha Giridhari Shri Radhe Radha Giridhari Shri Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Prabhupada Shri Shri Radha Madhava Ki Jai Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai Okay, Prabhuji, would you like to read from Leelamrita, please?
Surely, Hare Krishna Prabhuji, yes, I'm doing. A boy traveled frequently throughout North India, intent on expanding his sale. It was not unusual for him to be given a few days in a week and sometimes a week or more at a time, as he traveled from one city to another. The pharmaceutical industry was just beginning in India, and doctors, hospitals, and pharmacies were eager to buy from the competent, gentlemanly agent who called on them from Bosch's laboratory of Calcutta. He would travel by train and stay in hotels. He liked the feelings of freedom from home and traveling afforded, but real drive was servicing accounts and getting new ones. That was his business. Riding in a third class unreserved compartment was often uncomfortable. The only seat was benches, which were often dirty, and passengers were permitted to crowd on without reservations. But that is how a boy traveled hundreds of miles every week. As the train moved between towns, he would see the numberless small villages and then the country land that spread out before him on either side of the tracks. At every shop, he would hear the cries of tea vendors as they walked alongside the train windows. Chai, chai, tea. The British had introduced it, and now millions of Indians were convinced that they could not get through the morning without their little glass of hot tea. As a strict Vaishnava, Abhay never touched it, but his wife, much to his displeasure, was becoming a regular tea drinker. Although Abhay was accustomed to dressing as a European businessman, he never compromised his strict Vaishnava principles. Most of his uh, fellow Bengalis had taken up fish eating, but Abhay was always careful to avoid non-Vaishnava foods, even at hotels. Once a vegetarian hotel, the Empire Hindu Hotel in Bombay, was served onions. He was served onions, and sometimes hotel people tried to serve him mushrooms, garlic, and even eggs, but all of these he carefully avoided. Keeping a small semblance of his home routine, he would take his bath early in the morning with cold water. He followed his routine year round, and when in Sharanpur, he did so during the bitter cold weather. The hotel keeper was greatly surprised. Ovoy conversed with many people in his travel. A doctor in Dhaka told him that on his way on the office, he had passed a farmer talking to a friend and could tell by the sound of the farmer's cough that the farmer would die within a few hours. Another doctor told a boy that he had just come from seeing a pneumonia patient who was defying nature and medical science by continuing to live. He met a Mohammedan doctor in Goya who lamented that he had just lost a patient, although he had given the man the best medicine. Such accounts from the men of medical profession confirm Baba's conviction that without God's sanction, no one could be saved. Not that he ever thought of his medical sales as philanthropist work. Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati had already convinced him that the only way to serve a person was by giving him Krishna consciousness. Abhay's medical products were strictly for business. On one business trip, it was in 1925, he traveled through Agra, only 40 miles south of Vrindavan. And taking the opportunity, he made his first visit to holy Vrindavan, fulfilling his childhood aspirations. He lived the sight of Vrindavan, but he could spend only a day or two. Even a single day away from the sales work could be critical. As a reverend pilgrim, Avoy visited a few temples, especially the principal temples established by the followers of Lord Chaitanya. But he had to move on. So, Prabhu, shall I stop here?
It's up to you, Prabhu. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Prabhuji. Then I'm stopping here now.
Okay, sure. As Sarvasastrati Piyusha Sarvavedeka Satvala Sarvasadantara Nadya Savala Kaikatrpada. A nectar from the ocean of all scriptures, singular fruit of all the Vedas, rich mine and the precious gems of all conclusive truths, you are the only giver of sight to all the worlds. Sarva Bhagavata Prana Shrimad Bhagavata Prabhu Kalitvan Todita Ditya Shri Krishna Paravartita. O life of all the Supreme Lord's devotees, O Master Shrimad Bhagavatam, you are the sun risen in the darkness of Kali. You are the exact image of Shri Krishna. Paramananda Pataya Prema Varshaksharayate Sarvada Sarvasevyaya Shri Krishna Namostume. I bow down to you, who is supremely blissful to read. Your every syllable pours down a flood of prema. You can always be served by everyone, for you are Shri Krishna himself. Mad ekabando mad sangin mad guru mahadana manistaraka mad bhagya mad ananda namostute. My only friend, my constant companion, my spiritual master, my great wealth, my savior, my good fortune, my source of ecstasy, I bow down to you. Asaru saruta dayanati nishtata kara hanamanjagata chinmam premda hritkanti yospara. O bestower of saintliness to the unsaintly, O exalter of the most fallen, please never leave me, always appear in my heart and my voice with pure love. Gantara Srimad Bhagavatam Ki Jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we are reading from Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 18, entitled Prithu Maharaj Milks the Earth Planet. Text number 6. Purasrishta yo shadhayo brahmanaya vishampate pujyamana maya drishta asadbhir adrita vratahi. Purasrishta yo shadhayo brahmanaya vishampate pujyamana maya drishta asadbhir adrita vratahi. Purasrishta hyo shadhayo brahmanaya vishampate ujjamana maya drishta asadbhir adrita vratahi. Word for word, please repeat. Pura, in the past. Srishta, created. He, certainly. Or shadhaya, herbs and food grains. Brahmana, by Lord Brahma. Yeah, all those which. Vishampate, O king. Ujjimana, being enjoyed. Maya, by me. Drishta, seen. Asadbhi, by non-devotees. Adrita vratai, devoid of all spiritual activities. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai. Translation. My dear King, the seeds, roots, herbs, and grains, which were created by Lord Brahma in the past, are now being used by non-devotees who are devoid of all spiritual understanding. Purport. Lord Brahma created this material world for the use of the living entities, but it was created according to a plan that all living entities who might come into it to dominate it for sense gratification would be given directions by Lord Brahma in the Vedas, in order that they might ultimately leave it and return home back to Godhead. All necessities grown on earth, namely fruits, flowers, trees, grains, animals, and animal byproducts, were created for use in sacrifice for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Vishnu. However, the planet Earth in the shape of a cow herein submits that all these utilities are being used by non-devotees who have no plans for spiritual understanding. Although there are immense potencies within the earth for the production of grains, fruits, and flowers, this production is checked by the earth itself when it is misused by non-devotees who have no spiritual goals. Everything belongs to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and everything can be used for his satisfaction. Things that should not be used for the sense gratification of the living entities. This is the whole plan of material nature, according to the directions of this material nature. In this verse, the words asad bihi and adrita vratai are important. The word asad bihi refers to the non-devotees. The non-devotees have been described in Bhagavad Gita as duskritana, miscreants, mudhas, asses or rascals, naradhama, lowest of mankind, and mayaya paritagya, those who have lost their knowledge to the power of the illusory energy. All these persons are asat, non-devotees. Non-devotees are also called grihavrat, whereas the devotees are called dritavrat. The whole Vedic plan is that the misguided conditioned souls who have come to lord it over material nature should be trained to become a dritavrat. This means that they should take a vow to satisfy their senses or enjoy material life only by satisfying the senses of the Supreme Lord. Activities intended to satisfy the senses of the Supreme Lord Krishna are called Krishnarte Kila Cheshta. This indicates that one can attempt all kinds of work, but one should do so to satisfy Krishna. This is described in Bhagavad Gita as yajna tat karma. The word yajna indicates Lord Vishnu. We should work only for his satisfaction. In modern times, Kali Yuga, however, people have forgotten Vishnu altogether, and they conduct their activities for sense gratification. Such people will gradually become poverty-stricken, for they cannot use things which are to be enjoyed by the Supreme Lord for their own sense gratification. If they continue like this, there will ultimately be a state of poverty, and no grains, fruits, or flowers will be produced. Indeed, it is stated in the 12th canto of Bhagavatam that at the end of Kali Yuga, people will be so polluted that there will no longer be any grains, wheat, sugarcane, or milk. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Mukam Korochi Vachalam Pangun Lagati Gurim Yakripatamaham Bande Shri Gurun Dinataranam Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So in the in the beginning of the 7th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna very clearly explains about his different energies. He says, Bhumir apo nalo vayu kangmano bure evacha ahankara iti yame bina prakriti ashtata. Apare yamitastwanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhutam mahabhoho yaye dam dayate jagat. He says that earth, water, fire, air, and ether constitute my separated material energies. Besides these, there is another energy of mine, another superior energy of mine, comprising of the living entities who are exploiting the resources of this material inferior nature. So, when the pure spirit soul turns away from Krishna in the spiritual world and enters this material realm, the natural pure qualities of the soul become covered, become contaminated. Those qualities are what? Sat, Chit, Ananda. The soul, the eternality of the soul becomes covered. The soul misidentifies with this temporary body. And therefore, it thinks himself mortal. The knowledge of the living entity becomes covered over with tama, with ignorance. And therefore he forgets his position, he forgets Krishna, he forgets about the spiritual world. And of course, Ananda, the spiritual ecstasy which the living entity was experiencing in Krishna's association, becomes covered. And therefore, because the living entity is pleasure-seeking by nature, it must try and find its juice, its happiness somewhere. And therefore, exploitation is the name of the game in this material world by the conditioned souls. That in order to try and find their happiness, they exploit material nature. And because they want to forget Krishna. But especially as time goes on, this propensity to exploit material nature increases. And we're hearing today at the end of Kali Yuga, the most degraded of all ages, there will be no grains, wheat, sugarcane, or milk produced. So it's really amazing how determined the living entities are to exploit material nature. Like, for example, the production of oil, it's called black gold, is becoming more and more difficult to find. Just like Hiranyaksha was very expert in exploiting the earth for gold. Similarly, the little Kali Yugites, the Jivas in Kali Yuga are very expert at extracting oil from the earth. And they have devised means with such great endeavor to extract oil. It's really quite amazing. That scientists found that there's in one part of the desert, I forget in which country it was now, where there's oil contained within the sand. And so they were thinking about ways on how to extract this oil from the sand, because oil mixed with sand, it's really difficult to separate them. So what they did is they dug huge holes into the desert, and they put plates underneath the sand, and then they used these machines to blast steam into the sand, and by the heat from the steam, it liquefies the oil, and then the oil falls down onto these plates, which are underneath the desert, and then they can take the oil in that way. It's such an endeavor. It's really, actually, it's quite impressive how determined they are to, extract oil. So yes, the living entities, are very expert, go to great lengths to extract the oil, actually anything, the grains that are being produced, I'd say there's some shocking statistics that I heard. I have them written down here. Give me a second. Okay. This is in regards to the production of food in general. Around 1/3 of food produced for human consumption, 1/3 of food produced from human consumption is either lost or wasted, amounting to a financial loss of about $1 trillion. Food loss, sorry, that's per year, that's annually. Food loss and waste are prevalent in a world where enough food is produced to feed the world's 7 billion people easily, yet 811 million people still go to bed hungry each night. 28% of the world's arable land production, food that is wasted, rather than being used to feed the most in need. The precious water used to produce food that is wasted could fill Lake Geneva 3 times. Now, probably many of you have never heard of Lake Geneva before, but to give you an idea, it's 580 square kilometers. And there's enough water wasted to fill it 3 times over. Food wasted in the developed world goes into landfills that produces greenhouse gases. In fact, food loss and waste accounts for over 3 billion tons of these gases per year. If it were a country, it would be the 3rd largest producer of greenhouse gases over the US and China, after the US and China. These gases are a major contributing factor to the climate crisis, affecting water supplies, accelerating desertification and droughts, and worsening the unpredictability of severity of weather events, which we're all feeling the pinch of, right? So many earthquakes, tsunamis, unpredictable weather. It's summertime here in New Zealand. We've been experiencing droughts, cyclones, all sorts of disturbing elements, simply as a result of humans exploiting material nature. So, according to the Vedic culture, there are 7 mothers. There's the biological mother, the nurse that assists the mother in raising the child. There's the mother of the king, the mother of the brahmana, the mother of the spiritual master, the guru. Then there's Gomata, the cow, mother cow, and of course, Bhumi Devi, Mother Earth. Now, it is very easy. I mean, no one, would want to exploit their mother for their sense gratification. In fact, it's it's considered very a heinous activity if one uses their mother for their sense gratification. And so yes, actually, we have a very impersonal society. You know, in Prabhupada's Pranam Mantras, we hear Nivishesha Shunyavadi, that he came to the West to deliver us from impersonalism and voidism. So this impersonalism, you know, when we take personalism, when we take the personal aspect of a living being away from them, it makes them very easy to exploit. Like, for example, all the devotees know that, you know, cows have personality. You know, they're individual living entities, and they have personality, they have feelings. You know, and if that personality is taken away from them, you know, then it makes them very easy to exploit. Like people who exploit cows for their milk or their flesh, you know, they see the cow as, you know, numbers with a dollar sign by the side of it. They see the cow as just a way to earn money. You know, there's no sense of caring for the cow as a person. So it's exactly the same with the earth. You know, Bhumi Devi is a person. You know, she has feelings. You know, therefore it's very, it's easy to exploit Mother Earth if her personality is taken away from her. And actually, it's the same with the rivers as well. We hear in the Shastra that all the sacred rivers in India are actually personalities. You know, there's a personal form, a presiding deity of those rivers. And because the personality is forgotten about in modern society, therefore we see the sacred rivers in India, the Yamuna, the Ganga, and they're being trashed. You know, they're having so much rubbish being thrown in them, waste from industrial sites, toxic waste, so much pollution, raw sewage, everything's being pumped into these rivers because there's no personality behind them, according to the people that are, you know, abusing them. So therefore, it makes Earth very easy to exploit when this personal form is, when the personality is taken away from her. So in today's purport, we're hearing how everything that is produced from Mother Earth is meant for sacrifice to be offered to the Supreme Lord. I was listening to a lecture the other day by Srila Prabhupada, and he was explaining how the Christians, they pray, please Lord, give us this day our daily bread. And Prabhupada is saying, well, what is the what is the problem? The bread is already there. But the question is, what are you going to do with the bread? Are you going to take it for yourself, or are you going to offer it to Krishna first? Offer it to the Supreme Lord. So actually, there's no scarcity of food. That there is ample food for every living entity, arranged by the Supreme Lord. The animals, they don't go hungry. Even the insects don't go hungry. Even the elephant, who eats so many kilos of food every day, never goes hungry. The Supreme Lord is supplying ample food for everyone. So everything, all of the food that we acquire from the earth should be offered to Krishna in sacrifice. This is the process of developing love. It's the process of becoming selfless in our activities. And actually, it is a practice. Well, what we are doing in the material world is that we're practicing sacrifice. We're practicing offering everything to Krishna. So by this practice, eventually, sometime down the track of continuously practicing, offering our words for glorification of Krishna, offering all the food that we prepare to Krishna, offering our energy, in distributing Krishna consciousness to others, then eventually, then we can become qualified as the gopis in our mood of sacrifice. In other words, wanting to use everything, our mind, body, and words for the pleasure of Krishna. Because what happens when we offer things in sacrifice is that not only are we recognizing everything belongs to Krishna, but actually this is where we get our real ananda. This is where we get our real bliss, our real happiness from. Offering everything to Krishna. But in the material world, we've completely forgotten this. We've forgotten this process of how to experience real satisfaction. Therefore, due to conditioning, we now have to practice. So it is essential part of bhakti, is performing activities for the pleasure of Krishna. Actually, it's just it should be a practice of human beings in general. Ideally, we should have varnashram dharma established, and this is Krishna's system, and ultimately one should come to karma yoga and then develop karma yoga into bhakti yoga. So therefore, by the practice of offering everything to Krishna, we can develop selfless activity and reawaken our ananda, our spiritual bliss, which we're always hankering for. So I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions or comments. Anything anyone would like to add?
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam. Thank you very much for the nice class. You have bring out a lot of points, particularly the impersonification of the Lord by the Mayavadis often, and as a consequence of that, and the general people of the civilization in particular at the current moment, we are exploiting that, not considering as our mother, which is given in the scripture. We are indiscriminately using it, and as a result of it, we are facing the consequence of that. That is the automatic consequence. When we forget that everything belongs to the Lord, considers all facilities are for us. It's a very demonic mentality.
Yes.
And that is given in chapter 16 of Bhagavad Gita. What is the mentality? Unfortunately, that is manifested everywhere around. And the consequence, what you have told, the food wastage, the vagaries of weather, the production, dwindling production of food grains. But in Lord's creation, the Lord is Purna. The Lord has created everything. His creation is perfect. So so we should not face these things if we follow what the Lord has told us to do. And
Yes.
And if we follow that, as you have rightly told, when we consider everything for the service, utilize everything for the service of the Lord, our care, our demands are automatically made by the Lord. He has already arranged for us everything. But we, in our what do you say, which are wrong knowledge, we are trying to exploit all these things for ourselves, and in this way creating problem for us. So
Yeah.
the quicker we understand that, the better we utilize this everything for the service of the Lord, then not only we are in the right track, but we are also getting peace, and we can go back to the Lord, because Lord is so merciful. He takes care of his devotees, and he will take care of us also when we do that, but not the other way the present people are doing. Thank you very much for bringing out all these things, and I request other who are present there can make their comments. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing that.
Hare Krishna Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna Prabhu.
Beautiful classes, making us understand that Mother Earth is a person. We should respect all 7 mothers, knowing that they are the personality of Godhead. So when we do not understand or don't try to understand, then what's the problem comes up? Because we don't respect. If you don't pay respect, ultimately you won't get respected. So that is what is actually happening. And slowly the interaction between the respect and respected becomes so thin, ultimately we get lose taste. And because of the losing taste, that's ananda. We miss our ananda. That's why Bhagavad Gita chapter 3:13 says, Yagna Shishta Ashino Santo, Muchante Sharva Kulvisha, Bhunjante Tu Agam Papa, Ye Pashanti Atma Karmana. So that is how it should be. Before we use it, we need to offer it to Lord, so that we get the mercy. And because of the mercy, we get the ananda. And that part we are missing each and every day by each and every human being in this world. And that's the consequences we see around. Shortage of everything. As you mentioned, the oil level is going down and down and down. One day there will be no oil, because so much so this exploitation is there. It is going to get zero bottom. So the bottom line is, if we don't acknowledge the Supreme Personality as a person and his appointed personalities, then this problem will persist, and slowly will proceed to the end of Kali Yuga, where there will be no food, no grains, no milk. and everything will collapse automatically. So this is a very great warning for all of us to understand the importance of utilizing the natural sources provided through material nature very wisely and follow the scriptures to respect them as a personality of God. That's all from me. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prabhuji. Anyone else have any?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, thank you very much for this wonderful class. For me, this class, the main takeaway for me is how you brought out the correlation between exploitation and impersonal thinking. So that's even in our relationship with people or anything, if you treat them, if you don't think of them as persons, we are bound to exploit them. And I liked, that's a takeaway for me from today's class. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Stamba Bhava Prabhu. Thank you for my humble obeisances.
Hare Krishna, Julia.
Thank you for such a nice class on such a relevant topic. I think that we're all feeling the effects of extreme weather and the crazy Kali Yuga, and we certainly see a lot of concern for this in the public eye. Sustainability is a very great concern. It's certainly reached the mainstream. I used to be in that field of work myself. And so my question is, how can we, could you give any advice on this topic of how to bridge this concern for sustainability and saving the planet to Krishna consciousness? Obviously, increasing impersonalism, personifying, or increasing the awareness of the personality of nature and Mother Earth and so on. Can you give any more specific advice on this bridge? Say for young people at the university, etc.
Right. So if I understand your question, you're saying you're asking if I can explain how to show people that to be more personal with the earth.
Yeah, so that was one suggestion I was asking. Perhaps you could elaborate on. My question is, how can we bridge young people who are concerned with the environment to Krishna consciousness?
Okay. Well, the most powerful way to teach is to teach by example. So we have to be living examples ourselves of living an environmentally friendly life. It's recommended we completely stop using plastic bags, or at least minimize it to as much as possible. There's many different ways. Living off the land, growing our own food, simple living. But yeah, the most, because we can't tell people, to do something like live an environmentally friendly life. If we're not examples ourselves, that's hypocrisy. So yes, as devotees, we should be leading by example. And of course, it's in order to attract young people who are very concerned about the environment, we can show them, we can take them to places where devotees are growing their own food, where they're living off the land. So it's, the main thing is that we become good examples. Okay. Is there anything else?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Can I add just an example I remember? As this GV, this Govardhan Eco Village is a beautiful example of your answer that will show us regular visit to Govardhan Eco Village will give us the impact how to use this Krishna conscious movement in the life of young generation. That will slowly give them the guidelines how to respect the Mother Earth, and then from there the changes will automatically come, as Shastra tells us. So those are the examples. By looking at those eco-village, how the system is being organized, and then we can have an idea to live on the strength of Mother Earth, not on the strength of people who are very, very much arrogant to the misbehaving with the Mother Earth. So that can give them the real picture of the future life.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thank you for sharing, Prabhu. Okay, should we stop here? Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Jai Jai Nitai Gaur Premanandi.
कल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। His Grace Mahaprabhu की जय। All glories to Srila Prabhupada, all glories to assembled devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.